Alright, in this video I'm going to teach you the infinite garlic glitch, and this is going to cover an entire year's worth of growing so you can see the entire process, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to teach you a few little cool things about garlic that you might not know. The best thing about this plant, honestly, is just the fact that at the end of the growing year, that's when you actually start to grow this stuff. So just when you think things are winding down, you get to utilize your garden again. So as you clean up your crops from the summer and get your tomatoes and your beans and everything pulled out of the garden and cleaned up, that's when you actually get to start the garlic. This ends up being started in about October, at least for my zone. I am in Wisconsin. You might want to look up what zone you're in to figure out when you should start these. But for me, it's about mid-October or Columbus Day, which is when the guy who gave me this garlic originally told me when to start it. So typically what I do is prep my land. I like to clean out all the old plants, get the weeds out. I do actually like to till it. I know there's all sorts of debates on whether you should till or not till, but I find that loosening up the soil just makes it easier for me to work in the garlic cloves because I'm going to be planting about 175 of them, so that takes me a while. And I also think that the looser soil allows the bulbs to get a little bit bigger and doesn't compact as much. I don't know if that's really true, but again, I just really like tilling the soil. It's kind of fun fighting the machine, really. I don't know why, but it's just a blast, and I just like working on the land. I don't know how else to describe it. So I like to do it, but I believe it is pretty optional. And just remember, the more weeds and other materials you can get out now, it'll make it a lot easier in the springtime when weeds start sprouting up because you'll just have a nice smooth surface to work with. So the more work you put into it now makes it a lot easier when it's really wet and cold in the spring and you got to kind of modify stuff. So put in the work now while you can. All right, now we are going to actually talk about the garlic here since the land is prepped. I am going to be growing hardneck garlic. I think it's superior to softneck garlic simply because you get a double harvest out of it. And I will explain that a little later and you'll see the footage. But there's something called garlic scapes, which means you get to eat from the plant twice, which is why it's superior to softneck garlic. So I think maybe it just doesn't last quite as long, but either way, this stuff is just better. You are going to want to put these in grids of 6 to 8 inches. I pretty much do about just enough where I can get my garden hoe through the rows, which helps me get rid of the weeds a lot easier later in the spring. So I would definitely plant it just wide enough for whatever weeding tool you use because it's going to help early on. Because I'm planting such an insane amount, I am just going to lay out one large grid first and then bury everything. You obviously don't have to do it this way, but I just find it's easier for me to keep track of where I left off as I move through the large garden bed. If you're only planting 10 or 20, you can probably just bury them as you go through there, but there's two important things to know as you're starting to bury them. The first thing is, and the most important, is the top and bottom. You should be able to sort of tell what it is, especially if you were to get these plants from your friends or from someone who hands them to you because they'll show you. But there is a definite top and bottom. The top is much more pointy, and the bottom has sort of a more rougher spot where you can almost see where roots would come out, and that's the base where the head is connected. So where they're all sort of connected to each other, that's going to be the bottom. That needs to go downward into the soil with the top pointing up, and you are going to bury these about 2 inches deep. Now, I have experimented with taking off some of that papery stuff or leaving it on, and I find zero difference, so there's no reason to put any effort into it. That stuff isn't going to cause it to rot. However, I would just rub it in your hand slightly just to get some of the papery stuff off, because I'm always nervous about some sort of rotting if you have too much organic material around your actual garlic. Whether that really matters, I don't know, but that's just how I've been doing it. I am using this awesome tool called a Humidity. This is a Korean gardening tool actually, and I really love it because it's sort of triangular shaped and I can just jab it into the ground and pull, and then it makes just a perfect pocket, and it pierces really nicely because it's not super wide until much later, and it just seems to work really nice. However, you can use a hand shovel, really anything that you can do to make a large enough sized hole for the actual garlic clove to slide down in. Just make sure you're orientating them properly, and you should be good to go, and you can just push the dirt back over the hole, and that's basically it. Just set up your grid. Now, one final tip, if you are doing a large amount or even a small amount, try and mark these with poles because, again, you are growing these now in October and you're really not going to do much with them for a couple months, and you might forget where you left off, and as you may start to garden or do something in early spring, you might kind of screw up and kill these things, although they should be poking out of the soil before you even have the will to go outside and do anything. But still, I would highly suggest marking things off so you know where they are underground. Now, this is actually the best part. You just let these things go over winter. I don't water these. I don't do anything. I just stick them in the ground, and I just let Mother Nature take care of them. The snow doesn't matter, and the cold doesn't matter. As you can see in all this footage coming up, this is midwinter, December, all the way into that late winter, really early spring. You'll start to see them pop up around February and March, depending on what kind of winter you have. In this case, we had a pretty warm early winter, so they came up way sooner than I expected, and that kind of made me nervous because I thought, what if we get a cold snap, will it kill it? But it didn't. We got plenty of cold snaps, plenty of additional snow, and they just keep trucking. This is why I love hardneck garlic, because it just doesn't care. It just keeps growing. Rabbits won't eat it, squirrels won't eat it, deer won't eat it, nothing eats it. It just powers through the winter and just does fantastic all the way up until harvest. Now, this early spring is actually a little important reminder. Once they get about 6 inches and they're quite defined and they're pretty strong, I would take your gardening tool of choice and try and run it through the lanes just to remove some of those early weeds, because as these plants get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's a little harder to weed, and all the weeds are going to do is steal nutrients from your soil and just make things a little more messy. So try and keep up on the weeding while the stuff is still small, because once it gets big and tall, you're not going to be able to. Here we are early May. Things are really popping off and it's quite big. This is another reason why I really like this stuff, and onions, which you'll see some footage of as well, and shallots. They're like my 3 favorite things because they're like infinite food glitches, because you just can replant more next year from your harvest. And you'll see, well, you kind of saw what I mean, where one head just turns into cloves. So you can basically multiply stuff. But you can see they're already getting really tall really fast. So it's fun to see this stuff. I do water these if we're getting like a really dry, like long dry spell and they seem like they're thirsty. But usually Mother Nature pretty much handles it. Now, here's one of the more important parts about hardneck garlic. You have to cut the scapes off. It will make the bulbs much bigger, and you can eat the scapes. And what are garlic scapes? Well, they're the flowers that come out of the very central part of the stalk, pretty much about 2 months before harvest, a month before harvest, and they're awesome. They almost like the consistency of a green bean when you pluck them early when they're nice and tender. You fry them up. It's awesome. I love it. It's just it's like you get literally 2 food sources from one plant. There's not many plants that really are good at doing that besides like eating the leaves. So it's awesome. Take advantage of it. It'll help your bulbs get bigger, and you can try new food. They're so good. So you got to do it. All right, now we are going to talk about how to harvest this stuff. In the footage, you'll see that it's a little early for mine, but typically it's around like end of July, sometimes early July. It really depends on the weather. But what you're waiting for is at least half the plant to be yellow and like dried up. And that's pretty much like the top plant dying and it's sending its nutrients back down into the bulb. And that's when you're at pretty much that optimal size. Now I'm pulling mine up a little early just because I feel like it and just the timing in my life. Because again, it's only about a quarter like yellow and dried up. But I didn't see a huge reduction in my yield size, so I'm not that concerned. But that's what you're looking for. When you do dig these up, you are going to go about 6 inches from the bulb, push a shovel straight down, and then just try and like break up the earth so you don't pull the actual stalk out of the center of the bulb or the head of the garlic, and you're just going to pull them out of the ground. Now, this is where the infinite garlic glitch comes from that I mentioned in the very beginning. You can see that we planted 70, I think I planted 170 garlic cloves, and now we have 170 garlic heads, which means we pretty much 4x or 5x our garlic, which is insane. And that's why I love this plant, because now I'm just going to save some more heads for the future for this next year's planting, which will be in October again, and just keep doing the same cycle. And so you can eat a bunch of garlic and grow a bunch of garlic. It's just so awesome. You never have to buy seeds. And honestly, the coolest part about this journey is I started with exactly 2 heads of garlic, but I haven't been eating any for years, and I've just been multiplying it, and now here I am where I can share, eat, and regrow, and it's so wonderful. Just like garlic, there's shallot, bunching onions, and there's a few other plants that do this, and I like these the most because animals don't touch these plants. They're really hardy. You can plant them like late fall, which means like you don't have to do any like seed starting. That's the best part. You don't need seed mats. You don't need grow lights. You just take the bulbs or the onions and you stick them in the ground and just let Mother Nature take its course, and it does so wonderfully. I highly suggest if you've been a failure at gardening, just grow this stuff. It's really easy. It's really fun, really rewarding, and honestly, I think it's the least amount of work compared to all the other vegetables out there. So yeah, I mean, once you've got everything harvested, you can take your best bulbs and save those for the future crop, so you always keep a strong crop. And here you can sort of see, not the best, but I did sort out which ones I accidentally left the garlic scapes on, and leaving the flower on definitely did reduce the total bulb size, so that is not a myth from what I've seen like personally with my own eyes. All the ones where I cut the scapes off early, the bulbs are generally much larger. Now there are anomalies here and there, but everything I left the flowers on are much smaller bulbs. So definitely cut those scapes off. If you're not going to eat them, try and give them away, but at least cut them off so you get bigger bulbs. Then finally, once they're out of the ground, I do like to leave them sit in the sun for a day or two, just because it really dries that outer part out and sort of prevents the little bits of mold from setting in, because when you first pull them up, everything is still fresh and moist. So I let that sun really just bake them and cure them really nice. And then after those first few days out in the sun, then you can bunch them up nicely, and you're going to want to hang them so they can breathe really well. You do not want moisture to build up. So I just hang mine or set mine in laundry baskets where it's really easy for them to breathe and dry and cure. And you're going to wait for those greenish stalks to become completely brown. And that is the bulbs taking up all that extra nutrients. And you're going to have your best garlic that will last a long time. If you skip this step, the garlic can go bad a little quicker. So definitely do the curing, because again, this footage that you're seeing right now at the very end here, this is October again, and so that's from July to October. All this garlic is perfectly fine. So that's months and months that you could be eating the garlic as well. It stores for a very long time and it is fantastic. But again, I'm going to be replanting this soon and continuing the infinite garlic glitch.